It's quite an interesting premise that we've got set up now for this question about engaging young people, participation, what that means to live music. And it'd be just to get a show of hands of kind of who considers themselves to be actively working with engaging young audiences here. Okay, quite a few people. So, I mean, practically, if we're looking at what we can take away from this and kind of what we want to learn, what we want to discuss, this is an age-old debate about how to cultivate an audience, how an audience identifies with a particular venue, a particular subculture, what that means to them. But let's open that up and discuss it beyond 6 o'clock as well, as it's the last panel, maybe over a drink. I'm going to get the panelists to briefly just introduce themselves before we start talking about some of these ideas and concepts. So, Catch, if you just want to say briefly about your work.
So I'm Catch Holmes, and I organise a music festival in Scotland. It's sort of broadly world rootsy type music, and we actually have quite a broad range of ages from 0 to over 60, with the biggest age range probably between 25 and 35, trying to get a few under 25s. And I've just recently started managing the Nest Collective, which is a folk promotion and representation organisation based in London.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
So I go by the name of Kieran Canado. I'm founder of Live and Love Talent. We focus on artist development and events for them to showcase that talent. Also an ambassador for Wired for Music. I'm very excited to be here. I think engaging young audiences is a brilliant concept to talk about. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say and what our panelists have to say.
Hello everyone, my name's Dom Hodge. I come from a place called Fruct, or a company called Fruct. We're an agency who help consumer brands, the likes of Nando's, Coca-Cola, lots of others, work in the area of music. So I guess attracting and cultivating audience is something that I have to help them do. So I come from, I guess, a different part of the world, the solution, the problem perhaps, than other people.
Of me, sorry for you to say. Hello, my name's Wando Abizier. I work for a company called Non-Classical. We put on classical club nights and make records as well. Got a record label, yeah. So the idea is contemporary classical music in clubs and pubs. And so I run the events, I put on the nights there, and also look at kind of developing the organisation in terms of like where money's coming from, where we're going forwards, like how to keep on like reaching new audiences. But I actually started out in theatre. I don't know if you read my bio, it just when I read it myself, it just sounds mental. But I started out in theatre and experimental theatre and also dance, and so I work across quite a lot of different fields. I've got quite a few different areas that I'm used to, like connecting to different types of audiences.
And I didn't introduce myself. I'm Ollie Kluczewski. My background is in working with young people, participation, producing new music events across a whole range of styles, genres. I just want to pick up, just go straight with Kieran actually. This idea of a young audience member. As the youngest person on the panel, what are we talking about when we're talking about a young audience, a young person?
When we're talking about young audiences, it's just straight up science. To engage young people, it takes thought and innovation, because things are continuously changing. Our ways of communication are continuously changing. So in terms of engaging young minds, you have to go the extra mile to get the numbers. Absolutely. And
with your own, because obviously you're classing yourself, introducing yourself as an entrepreneur, a musician, but also a promoter of new music.
Yeah.
For you, at the moment, what are some of the challenges you're kind of facing in developing and cultivating that audience and making that exciting for young people?
At the moment, the challenge is starting from scratch. What I realize is starting from scratch is very challenging. But it's beautiful at the same time, because you really have to just make use of what you have. And by doing so, we're learning a lot. There's a lot of organizations that have all the money they need already, but they just haven't got that relationship with the young people. So by starting from scratch, we're literally getting out there from word of mouth. We're using word of mouth effectively, where it's literally just friends of friends of friends of friends, bringing people. And over the past few weeks, the workshops, the numbers have like quadrupled by effectively using the word of mouth. Word of mouth to engage them more.
And just in terms of this, maybe come to you, Dom, this idea of kind of marketing strategies, various kind of techniques around that in generating audiences and new audiences. From a branding perspective, just focusing on your links with technology companies, do you want to share some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that young people are a very attractive audience to lots of different types of brands because, you know, there's the old adage, if you get them when they're young, they stay with you. If you look at the banking sector, much vilified, and rightly so probably, but, you know, that's the way they used to work. Everyone had their NatWest piggy banks or their Midland Bank little bags. You remember the things they did to get us when we were kids. And technology companies are acutely aware of driving loyalty and word of mouth amongst young people, getting them using their products, getting them talking about their products. And, you know, some of that's done through their marketing. A lot of that increasingly is done through the content they create and the way they work with popular culture. So that could be a film, doing a deal with a film, being in that, their products in the film. And it could be done with music, being seen in the hands of someone, a musician that someone loves, putting on an event where the product has, a purpose, being at festivals, which is a huge space for brands, there's lots of uses for technology. So, brands want young people, technology brands want young people, and they're pushing the boat in terms of, showing what, marketing can do. And I think kind of one of the points you were making, you've got to work hard with young people because they are incredibly adept at using different platforms at the same time. You have this kind of, multi-screen, multitasking generation. But they're also quite cynical and they'll see through bullshit. If you try and do something that's contrived or work with someone or do something in music which isn't natural, it won't only not acquire them into your brand, it will have a massive detrimental effect. And the one thing that they can do, and my wife's a psychologist actually, so it's fascinating when I talk to her about this, is that young people can block messages very, very effectively, more than any other generation before. When they're looking at screens, they literally learn to look down and not see a banner, and that's very challenging for technology companies. So it's all about trying new things, innovating, getting people talking, making marketing natural.
I mean, it comes back to some of the issues that have been discussed throughout the day, this kind of notions of integrity, trust, ownership, empowerment of audiences, and how, I suppose in this context, how venues can connect to that. Wando, in terms of non-classical 10-year anniversary at the moment, how some of those notions of, I suppose, brand association and the integrity of non-classical, how has it changed over the last 10 years? What are the things that have had to be put into place to develop that audience?
Well, I think when Gabriel Prokofiev founded Non-Classical 10 years ago, and when he did, it was just a completely different landscape. I think Non-Classical was pretty much the only kind of company doing what we were doing, putting on contemporary classical music. In the first night was in Cargo. But since then, there's been a lot more kind of experimental music. Cafe Otto's kind of grown up at the same time and become like, the main like hub of experimental music in London. And so there's a lot more competition for us. But with what we're doing, I guess, like you said, there's this thing about authenticity. There's just always this naive kind of like dream that we think that the music, this contemporary classical music, should be heard by everybody and should be put on at the Shackwell Arms the night after there's been like an indie band. And there's no reason why it shouldn't, because it's brilliant music, it's exciting, it's played by young musicians, written by young composers who all live around the corner. I DJ there, Gabriel DJs there, it's all kind of still really DIY and still really exciting.
But it's still equally as hard to keep that audience interested and develop that.
Yeah, and I think the ways of reaching the audience has really changed. I think when it first started, it's quite word of mouth, but also it was like really kind of new and exciting for the press. So there was, if you go back 10 years, there's loads of articles in the national press about classical music in a pub, and you can't keep on spinning that story 10 years later, and that's definitely not what we're interested in keeping on selling, because it's not it's not just like a gimmick for us, it's part of the way we think the music should be heard. So now it's been a lot more, actually we've been working with Amelia over there, who's amazing marketing person, and we've been working a lot on, well, yeah, I mean, how do you really kind of get the music out there? And we did a gig, you know, in a square in Dalston, because we just knew there'd be lots of people walking past, and we're getting new audiences from that, and also just partnering. We've got a gig coming up with Block, who've got a warehouse space in Hackney Wick, and it's just a partnership that makes sense because they're really excited about some of our artists who are coming out on the record label, and we're really excited about some of like the DJs that they work with, and now some of their DJs are doing remixes on our label, and so it's just kind of keeping on. Really, like we just go further into what we're excited about in the music, and just keep on using that as a way of connecting to new people, really.
And it's quite interesting you say that, because this idea of expanding something and diversifying, you can keep doing that, but it still has to be that kind of core centre that an audience, and particularly a younger or newer audience, has to identify with. You have to have that a grounding in a way, and I think that's something to always remember, that it's not always about trying one particular organisation or brand or an event, trying lots of different things. You've very much got the centre there, but it's cool. You're expanding it in a really interesting way. I mean, Katja, are you put in a folk way, I suppose? Is there similarities there with the Nest Collective and the audiences that are coming to those events and what you're trying to develop?
Yeah, I think, well, folk music loosely maybe has some ideal of participation and sort of across the generations. Maybe traditionally it's been older audiences, and I think recently younger ones more.
Sorry, just going to interrupt the debate. There's a silver, is anybody owning a silver van that's blocking a major exit?
It's like those rave mixtapes.
Reg, RJ14. No. 2 are you?
Okay. Get towed. No.
Sorry, Katja. Right. Generations. What was I talking about?
Participation.
Well, so I think it's about participation, isn't it? And that thing of having a grounding in the music style. Mm-hmm. So I think possibly to engage young people, they need to have some sort of involvement with the music. Whether, you know, presumably playing it themselves, I would say, often. And in folk music, there's an ideal of the audience also being the participators, as it were, and also of sort of working across generations. And I suppose I quite see all sort of music as being a bit potentially like that, or ideally like that, and that's kind of a way to draw young people in, if that makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense.
Absolutely. Can we take a question from the floor, please? Okay, yeah. Right. 1 sec, sorry.
I work with the jazz organisations, and one of the problems that we have in engaging younger audiences is that there's a sort of preconception of what jazz is, and they just go, no, we don't like it, you know. And I wonder whether working with folk or working with classical, how you break through those sort of preconceptions and engage people who just, you know, don't want to be engaged. And you can do it on any platform and in a cool venue or something that maybe crosses over and does. We've done jazz and visual artists and jazz and reggae artists, and as soon as you put the word jazz on it, people just go, no, I don't like it. And I just wonder how you break through those kind of barriers.
I think for folk, quite often it's because they play it, or because their parents play it, or because they've had an opportunity to play it when they were little and they've grown up playing it, and their pals play it, and then they play it together. But I'm aware that in other styles, like, you know, maybe sort of more rocky or alternative styles, you come to it and it's a sort of rebellion against your parents. So I don't know, there's interesting questions. Like with jazz, I don't really know much about jazz or classical. I would have thought it'd be similar in classical in that you grow up playing it.
Yeah, I think the point is it's difficult, and I think it's something that you have to take a kind of holistic approach to, that it might not be just about the music, it might be about I mean, one thing we want to do with non-classicals, we want to do some under 18 nights where we're connecting with a younger audience than we ever have done. But the way we want to do that is through a process of bringing young groups of people in, and some of them might be the kind of like the experts, the ones who play the classical instruments, but some of them might be more interested in blogging or might be more interested in photography. And so to kind of to get these kind of groups together who then, they go out, and if they go out somewhere, they want to bring their friends. So it's doing this what's called peer-to-peer marketing, networking, I don't know. But the point is that it's connecting different entry levels for it, because then once they're there, I mean, good music is good music, and they might like it, but they might not have got through the door in the first place. So it's like getting them.
I think also that the younger you are, it's quite dangerous to talk about young people as one kind of homogenous mass, because the younger someone is, the less willing they will be to take a risk or stand out from the crowd. I mean, it's just a kind of the way we develop as human beings, and if their friends are doing it or they can see a path into other people around them, they're much more likely to take a risk. And like you say, if there's many ways in, that's the way to do it. But I also think what you guys do is wonderful with the kind of juxtaposition between, pure classical music, for want of a better term, and electronic music, and that provides a pathway. And labels like Ninja Tune did a great deal for jazz. I mean, I'm a big jazz fan now because of Mowax and Ninja Tune, because those people were sampling jazz records, and DJ Premier and these other people. So sometimes I think, while it might not be seen as purist, I don't know if people would challenge this as some, kind of showing a young person something they know and understand, and the pathway and where it comes from, that's the route in. And then over time, people feel what they don't understand, it's helping them understand what it is.
Just adding to what Dom said, I think that would be a very effective approach because a lot of modern music have been sampled from these old classics, and to show them where it's coming from would be beautiful. And also just finding the young jazz lovers, finding them and starting with them, and again, word of mouth will just explode off from there, but starting with those who are passionate about it.
But also this idea, this notion of musicians as curators, young people as programmers, as producers, and there's some really amazing opportunities out there to get involved in that, to kind of produce live events and curate your own audience as a young person, as a musician, as an audience member. And that's something, it's really interesting. I think there's a growing scene in that, really is. We've got another question here. Okay.
Well, it's not a question, it's kind of following up on the question you asked and everything that you've just said. I think the idea that we're really shaped by what we grew up with, what we associate with, what our parents listened to, what we rebelled against, or what we really took from our parents is so fascinating and worth exploring. I really want to understand it more, because I think jazz particularly is one where, so many people have this complete block about it, and I really want to know why, because I discovered it when I was about 13, and that was just, great, I ran with it. But in my circle of friends, it was cool, whilst I know other people, it was so uncool to like jazz. And so I think one of the problems is labeling music, and there are so many ways in to try. So I love what non-classical does, because they put it in different venues, which is great. Or you can do kind of crossover stuff where you sample bits from classical or jazz, but put them into what music people think is more cool. What we do is we put on gigs where we try and juxtapose all these kinds of music within one gig, and we do not label them. Which is very hard to sell, because people have no idea what they're coming to. So we haven't got the answer yet. But when I curate the event and talk about the pieces of music that we've played, I never say, and that was a piece of jazz, or that was a piece of classical. And what's amazing is that people often don't actually label it. They don't know what it is. They just heard a piece of music that they liked. What was that? And I say, that was by a composer called Ravel. I don't say it was a classical thing, and they haven't heard it as classical, and they're all folk or jazz or world or whatever. So that's one approach.
We know one of the reasons that genres were created, actually, an old adage from the early part of the last century, is that records were sold in furniture shops with record players, and so the people selling music didn't know anything about music. So they had to categorize it to help them sell it, because people bought the song at that point, not the artist. And then as more records came out, they wanted to collect the artist, and so it all became about classification for kind of ease of sales and to help push music out there. But I agree, in a way, it hinders us now, because it typecasts music, and there's a fear or a stigma around some and not around others.
It's a problem for us now in terms of promoters, venues, how we sell ourselves, because we're not prepared to fall into a genre.
Who are you?
I run a collective called Live Junction, which is based on Late Junction, which does exactly what I love. They juxtapose the most interesting things and show how well they can go together, and that's what we do, but live.
I think we've got, yeah.
This is kind of not really a question, actually. This is more an answer to both of your points, because I am a marketing consultant, and I work with non-classical, and I work with Sirius, that does jazz, and many other things. I used to work with Ollie at the Roundhouse and do many other things in music. And my background is not classical music or jazz at all. I work in more independent and mainstream music. And what I found with working with both of those organisations is the genre is not the problem at all. It's actually a lot of the jargon and the inaccessible language and visual language that's built up around each little genre. So it's not the labelling itself, it's how you then talk to people about it. Because most people aren't turned off by the word contemporary classical or by jazz music. That's not really the problem. The problem is extended technique, or not being allowed to clap, or whatever it might be, that when you arrive at the event, or when you're looking at the marketing, might turn you off. So what we do is look outside of those genres for different ways to present what it is we're doing. So making sure people's press shots look like press shots that might be on Pitchfork, or making sure that we do really cool social media campaigns that are built into the events. We did a march on Dalston where we started in Gillett Square and we went down to the Shacklewell Arms. It's not just about doing an event in a pub, it's how do you make that event really exciting and accessible and interactive and cool. So I think it's about breaking things down and making sure that you're genuinely being accessible, not just kind of accessible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how we do.
Thanks, Amelia.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I help to run a creative music making project for young people in Bromley and Bexley, so out of London. I set it up about 6 years ago, and it's a part of London where there's basically nothing cultural. It's like a cultural abyss. So there's like no venues really for music, no music organisations, and so we really had to start from scratch. And what we found, going along with what Ollie was saying about using young people as programmers and producers themselves, is that when we started running our open mic nights, you know, it was a struggle getting audiences, but actually once we set up a really small panel of young people to present them and produce them themselves, it made a massive difference, and we were completely oversubscribed because, of course, they bring their friends, they spread the word, you know, much better than we were able to do. Mm-hmm. And I think I would totally recommend that to other organisations, but what I would say is that it is quite time-consuming. You've got to do it properly, and you've got to help that group of young people to manage themselves. So it's worth thinking about doing, but it's worth thinking about how you do that and the capacity within your organisation to do it well. And the other point that the question I was going to ask to the panel is, our experience as well has been quite interesting, because obviously setting up a project with young people, everybody said to us, you must get your social media right, you know, you must have an active presence, and we do in the places that you'd expect us to, but actually our main audiences still come to us word of mouth. And I just wondered what the panel's view on how important, you know, really being on it with the social media and that sort of thing is, or whether in fact it's still down to, as one of the artists said on a previous panel, putting a poster up.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell?
Yeah, I would say like social networking is everyone says it's so effective. You've got to be on it. You've got to be on it. That is true. You have to be on it. But in terms of effectiveness, we all know this already, that word of mouth is the most effective way of marketing. The other day we was running some workshops at Live and Love Talent, and the first workshop, 0 young people turned up. 0, apart from us who was facilitating the workshop. So immediately I know something had to be done about this. We had an event on in about 3 weeks. So at the next workshop, when we had a small group of young people, about 5, We worked with the young people, having them make decisions on how to engage more young people, done a presentation on word of mouth and how effective it is. And if we would like to establish a community of like-minded artists, we've got to demonstrate this effectively. And everyone went out the following week, numbers doubled. By the actual night, 2.5 weeks later, there was over 200 people at the show without none of my staff losing hair or anything, going crazy, trying to spam everybody and text everybody and drag the public in off the road, like, come to our event. None of that. It was just collective effort. And what you were saying earlier, like having the young people being leaders is definitely effective as well. Having them make decisions is super effective. When they do that, they kind of own it. So in terms of building it and getting more people, they feel like that's their responsibility. We got to do this. It's in line with their beliefs and they value what they're a part of. And having a few passionate young people involved will just make it explode.
I think like it's not, social media is a tool. It's kind of how you use it, and it's not the answer. It's part of the answer.
Yes.
So if a lot of those kids were probably talking to each other on social media, saying you've got to come down to this thing, but it wasn't initiated by you. It was initiated by them. So the word of mouth can happen through these channels. It's just got to be a mixture of it. I think if you use it like a broadcast channel, if you just put message out there and push them out, it's not going to be very effective. You've got to get someone to speak, got to get the people speaking themselves and just stimulate and sort of, propagate those conversations rather than necessarily trying to sort of own them and push them out. Because like I said before, that young people are very good at filtering conversations that they don't think are relevant and they just literally won't notice.
Yeah, just adding to that quickly, broadcasting, not really effective. People like personal messages and I have people that I'm in frequent contact with, but if I send a broadcast, I know they will not see it. They will not see it. So we definitely got to pick up the phone, make some calls. And what I've done to help me, because it's difficult for you to just pick up the phone and call 20 people and have 20 different conversations and you've got a long list of other things to do. But when you split it up into groups, like somebody call 5, I will call 5, you call 5, it's so effective, but it's all like teamwork. Teamwork is a very effective thing in this.
And again, it's maybe a general social media point, but my festival, Knock and Gorrick, has mainly been heard about through word of mouth. We do very little advertising. And, you get these kind of axes of social activity, people that have loads of friends and that everyone kind of likes to do what they do, like kind of social leaders. And if you get if those people are the people posting about you, if you just get a few of those, that's a really good way to kind of get it out.
Yeah, you see how kids, this YouTuber phenomenon as well, which is more of a mainstream thing, but if you look at some of these kids, these YouTubers, like hundreds of thousands of followers, they're just normal people making like mundane videos about what they're doing every life. But because it feels like it's authentic, or they've got this community that's been built up from, grassroots, the kids, they listen to them and they believe what they say.
We're going to take another question because we've got about 5 minutes left.
Well, I have got a question. I also have just a very short comment. I begin to feel like the old man of the sea. There's Rachel talking about doing things for young people in Bromley. In 1960, really, I mean it, I was a young person in Bromley, and actually the word of mouth was what got us going to just about every gig. David Bowie came through there, Bromley and Beckenham, playing the folk club in Beckenham, Pete France and Keith Tippett, all manner of people. It was a hotbed, and it was all word of mouth, me and my mates at school. So I'm very pleased to hear that word of mouth is not dead, it's alive and living, and obviously Bromley went a bit quiet over the years. So aside from that, I'm really pleased that you're saying about word of mouth, because you're absolutely right, and that, their tweeting or their social media is much more effective than the promoters. So that's great. Absolutely. My real question, though, is we're talking about young people. Well, actually, young people start at the age of 0, and there is so little concentration on the live music experience, either playing or indeed listening, for people before secondary school. Yes. And I wonder whether any of you are doing, that kind of work with people who are not old enough to be embarrassed about being out of line with their friends, as teenagers might be.
Yeah, the law prevents me from doing it in my work, really, because most of my clients can't target children actively. Most brands, aren't allowed to for ethical reasons. So I think it's really important. I think music education on a personal level, is hugely important. I think this country's let itself down, and I think we've got a lot of rebuilding to do. You know, people in this room are real music lovers. We're aficionados, but there are a lot of people that aren't. They just don't have that exposure to it at a young age, and it's a big part of it. You know, it breaks down the stigma as it gets them more involved. But yeah, sadly, I don't.
I think that the positive thing is that those opportunities are out, particularly in London, those opportunities are out there for that kind of demographic, that age group. But it is about creating a good opportunity for those people, not just any opportunity, and instilling that confidence to then become that future audience and then grow from that and then start making decisions themselves. We've got time for one more question.
It was just following up on all of that, really. I mean, I was about to say before you did that, surely before 16 or even before 14, it's got to be down to school projects or parents introducing their kids. And there's got to be more stuff, presumably, that is really, really accessible to schools and teachers and parents to introduce music, because before that, they're not looking into it independently. And that's where I'd really like to explore, is how to reach really young and make it really
There are
accessible.
things like Britain's Got Talent and these things that we might turn our nose up at culturally, but actually they can move the needle. You know, if a kid sees someone there playing the violin beautifully, or you know, look at what's happened to dance. You know, that's really taken off because of these shows. So mainstream culture can help move the needle, and then it's the responsibility of the wider industry to keep that momentum going, because these things can become fads otherwise and go away.